Welcome to episode 3 of our podcast, Leading in a Political Environment. It's great to welcome back Councillor Joanne Harding, elected member at Trafford Council, and Kath O'Dwyer, Chief Executive at St Helens Council. I know that we have explored individually with both Councillor Harding and with Kath their experiencing of leading in a political environment from a chief executive and a senior officer perspective, and also from an elected member perspective. However, delighted today to have them both back so that we can have a panel conversation, build on the individual podcasts, and also start to think about how do we build effective member-officer relationships. So welcome, Kath. Welcome, Councillor Harding. Fantastic that you're with us today. Can I just ask you, Councillor Harding, how did you get into a career in local government?
Well, if I'm being completely candid, Gillian, I think I fell into a career in local government. It was one of those things really that I didn't have a plan for it. I joined a political party, ended up in some fairly senior positions in that party fairly quickly. It was one of those things, as soon as you say yes to something, you end up with a multitude of roles. And then somebody had said, how would you feel about standing as a candidate? And I said, I will only do that if it's the area that I live in, because that matters to me. So it wasn't about having a safe seat. I wanted to represent where I lived. So I stood as a candidate and honestly never expected to win because it'd been held by the Conservative group for a long time. And I did win. But the other thing really was, I think when I had my daughter, that for me mattered. It wasn't about just standing on the sidelines and shouting. If I genuinely wanted to change things in my community, I had to put my money where my mouth is really and do something about it. So that's how I came into local government.
And how long have you been an elected member for now?
13 years I've been an elected member, and that has literally flown.
Absolutely. And Kath, welcome back. Great to be with you again today. And in terms of your local government career, what enticed you into being an officer in local government?
Not dissimilar. I sort of fell in, if I'm honest. I think I said in the earlier podcast, we're not great at shouting about the careers that are available in local government. So both my parents were teachers, so there was probably an element of public service, that sort of ran through me anyway. But I started my career in an adult training centre, we don't have them anymore, with adults with disability, and then moved into children's and then into field work, social work. But I've got to say, I've been really lucky. I've had an amazing career. I've worked with some fabulous people, made friends for life, and real opportunities. So it's probably something we need to shout out about a bit more, really, about the opportunities that there are. Most councils offer 600-700 different services. Yeah. The range of professions is, larger than most multinational companies, so we need to shout out about it a bit more.
We should, absolutely. And the national campaign for local government as well is so important. Yeah. So great that in the Northwest and with your support we'll be doing a lot of work on that going forward. And what we've talked about in the previous podcasts have been around the strength of relationship between elected members and officers. And we've said it's actually an art form rather than an exact science, and how, Kath, as you will kind of do that within your council as a chief exec and within a different council. It depends, doesn't it? As you say, and the place will define what the priorities are. But I guess from your perspectives, and maybe come to yourself, Councillor Harding, what actually is important for you in terms of building a relationship that's built on trust and mutual respect?
I think the key thing for me as a councillor is to remember who I serve and who elected me. So it's very easy sometimes, the more senior role you have as a councillor, to veer into officer territory. And I think councillors need to be very careful about that. We are not there to be operational officers of the council. And I know when I had the portfolio for adults, because my background is health and care, it was very easy for me to sort of become overly involved, and then I would have to stop and say, this is not my job. I'm not an officer, I'm an elected member. So for me, it's understanding who I'm there for. So I am there to serve residents. It's an understanding of the boundaries of my role. A word of advice I always give to councillors is don't believe your own hype, because you think that you are elected and you're going to save the world. You can't, you won't. You can do your best, but you won't. And I think the power dynamics, sometimes I've seen some councillors misbehave when it comes to officer relationships. I don't agree with the do you know who I am kind of shtick. It just doesn't rest well with me. So it's mutual trust. It's building that trust together, but it's being clear about the boundaries and roles and that Venn diagram that in the middle of the residents, and I've always got to make sure that I'm advocating and making sure the voice of my residents is heard in what I do.
Brilliant. And as we've said, actually, we are part of the same team, members and officers, and the reason we're there is for our communities and for our residents. But again, anything that you want to add to that, Kath?
I suppose it is about, it's that communication. Officers should operate on a no surprises basis with member colleagues. There's nothing guaranteed to get you in deep water than something coming as a surprise to a senior politician. So it is that communication, but it's also that respectful reminder that actually that's my territory. Or I'd like to talk to you about the implementation. I know it's my bag to implement, but I'm interested in your views. You know, rather than how would you like me to implement that? Because that is our, you know, and I do think it's a challenge for members, and Councillor Harding will know better than I really that I've spent 41 years in the profession, you know, and I've got a new council leader at the moment. He's been a leader a month. You know, so it's about how can I support him to be the best leader he can be. But it also, he gets that he's got stuff to learn, and he's taken advice and support from across the system. But it is about that communication and respectful challenge. But also, officers should try and be helpful. Mm. So there may not be a way to, we may not be able to achieve what the member's asking us to achieve in the way they're asking us to do it. But there might be another way we can do it that doesn't break the rules and, you know, is appropriate. So it is a team.
Yeah, team effort. And what I'm hearing is actually you're clear on your boundaries, you're clear on your roles, but actually you communicate and there is that dialogue between you to find the best way in order to deliver those key priorities that ultimately residents and local communities are saying are important to them. And just building on that, Kath, I guess, you know, what is it that you need from each other? What do you need from your elected members, from your leaders, from your portfolio holders in order for you to be able to do the job to your optimum standard? And then if that's okay, Councillor Harding, I'll come to you and think about that from an elected member political perspective.
I think from an officer perspective, you know, if we're developing a strategy or a policy or a way of doing things, what's really important to us is to have that political insight into what's the best way to play this. You know, what are going to be the political priorities within this particular area of policy or strategy, so that the officer takes advice from the member about, is this the right thing to do? Well, politically, will it land well? And what's the advice in steering it through to get to the outcome that is the best for residents? So we perhaps know the technical side of things, but your portfolio holder knows how to steer it through. So it's how you do it together.
Brilliant. Anything that you would add to that, Councillor Harding, in terms of what is it that you need from, I guess, the officers and the senior officers in order to enable you to, as you say, why you came in to deliver for your local residents and your local community?
Well, I think something Kath said before about the communication and the no surprises is important, because when I became a new cabinet member, and we'd only just taken over control of the council, so it was a big learning curve for all of us to have control of the council. We'd been in opposition for a long time. And one of the first things I asked it was a director of adult social care at that point, and I said to her, "What keeps you awake at night?" And she looked at me and said, "Nobody's ever asked me that question before." And I said, "But it really matters to me. What are the things that bother you about this area of work?" Because it's an area of work where we're dealing with people with lots of complex needs, people with vulnerabilities. And, you know, the buck stops with me politically as the message. If something breaks and there's a scandal or it hits the newspapers, who will they come to for a quote? It may well be me. So I want to know what keeps you awake at night. And then we developed that relationship over time, and then I would set priorities. I would say, these are my 3 priorities for the year. We may not be able to deliver on all of these priorities, but if I'm giving you a flavour of the things that matter to me, can we get the teams working around this? And again, she said, that is really helpful to me and my team, because we've got a focus, we know where we're going. So there's the bit about, again, as Kath said, what does this look like politically? What's the messaging? What's the communication? How's that going to land? Everybody's looking for a scoop and a story. And one of the things I always say to officers sometimes is, it's great that you're in the town hall, but when you're in the town hall, you're quite removed from the way residents see and perceive things. And the council is to blame for everything. You've only got to look at social media pages. It's always the council. So it's about having clear communication. It's about not being afraid to challenge some of those difficult conversations. And importantly for me, it's a can-do attitude.
Brilliant. I love that can-do attitude. We were talking before as well around there's always varying degrees of yes, aren't there? So there'll always be, hopefully, a way forward. And Councillor Harding, you mentioned at the beginning when you first came into local government around actually, you can't kind of conquer everything at once, or, we need to kind of eat the elephant in bite-sized chunks in order to achieve what you want to achieve. And I guess there's maybe some kind of myths as well around, the art form of being an elected member, or the way that, officers and members work together. Are there any kind of key myths that you think would be helpful to get out there in terms of actually that isn't reality? As we've said, reality is probably some of the practical things of building relationships, making sure we communicate effectively, understand what priorities are. Is there any other kind of myths that you think in terms of leading in a political environment would be helpful to quash?
I think for me, some of the biggest myths are ones the public need to understand about the role of an elected member. They get us all lumped in together with MPs. So they think we've got powers that we don't have. That's one thing. So I think there's almost like a public education programme that you need to do with members of the public and say, that's not what a councillor does. I think another myth is really, it's not as glamorous and well paid as you might think it is. However, it is incredibly rewarding. It's absolutely brilliant. 80% of the time, it's brilliant, and you can change things. You can change little things that make a huge difference to people. But it is really about dispelling some of the myths about public perception about the role of an elected member is one of the things I've been keen to do, particularly in the whole debate, not hate space, which we've been seeing of late. A lot of discourse in public life and that shouting and not pleasant debate. So I'm keen as a councillor to really work to get some of those myths dispelled.
It's a really important point that you raise, because again, we started the conversation about understanding what local government is about, the career, the fantastic careers that you can have. But as you say, actually, there is a communication piece externally as well in terms of managing expectations and clarity of understanding as to what is within our gift or what isn't. I guess from your perspective, Kath, is there anything that you would add?
I suppose there's, again, linked to the sort of public perception, if I can get my local councillor to ask for this for me, they'll be able to get it for me. but actually there's rules, whoever's asking. So some of it, again, is about public perception, that absolutely go to your local councillor, but they haven't got a magic wand. There's still parameters and rules and a way of going about things. And a budget, yeah. But also from an officer perspective, you know, we drum into officers as part of their induction, you know, this is a member-led authority. The bosses are the members. You know, you're here to be helpful and respectful, but actually that doesn't mean because a member asks for something, they get it. Mm-hmm. They only get it if it's within policy, within budget, and the right thing to do. So but again, it's, you know, supporting perhaps more junior officers with the confidence to say no respectfully and find an alternative. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it is, as you say, in terms of services or the public, it's the visible services that they tend to see, isn't it? You know, but the complexity of what is delivered across a local authority isn't necessarily always, you say, not the most glamorous of things that people may find, but it is the visible things that people will come to you for and hope that you can help them kind of find a way through, or to change it for them, which, as you say, magic wands, you know, are not always provided when you're successful. And I guess in terms of top tips, you know, fantastic experience that you both have within a local authority, and obviously working at a regional level as well. And you both have kind of national roles, both working, you know, in different levels across local authorities and local government, and interfacing with central government as well. I guess in terms of top tips for ensuring that there is really a nurturing, productive and mutually beneficial relationship between elected members and officers. Again, maybe yourself, Councillor Harding, what would be, I guess from your experience, some of the key areas that you would think, actually, as you said before about working with your exec directors, actually it was that prioritisation, it was clarity, that they understood, you know, what was important to you, understanding, you know, residents and kind of key priorities of your local communities. Anything else in terms of those, you know, top tips around how officers and members really work effectively together?
I think for me it has been over the years about my personal development. A top tip I would give to new elected members is don't just nod and say you understand it. If you don't understand it, genuinely ask. There is nothing worse than going into a meeting or pretending that you know something, because it's the governance, it's the legal frameworks that we all work within. If you don't understand it, then ask. It's really important, because, you know, the machinations of local government 13 years down the line, I still find something new every day that I think, didn't know that. So a top tip would be your personal development. Ask, develop those relationships. And again, I refer to one of my original points. Don't believe all the hype about yourself. Keep your feet on the ground. Remember who you are. But it's a job like no other. It's a role like no other. It's brilliant, varied, interesting. And the level of training and support you have is there for you to take it, really.
And we talked previously in other episodes on the podcast around how actually peer support, working, you know, with each other, and you make a really important point around elected member development and support, and that's within an authority, as you say, but actually, you know, through North West Employers, through the LGA, through other mechanisms as well, there's an opportunity for members to really think about how they continually develop their skills, you know, develop their confidence, and I guess in terms of that peer network, it's important to note that if you don't know, you know, we were talking before, Kath, if you don't know, you can reach out, because there are more experienced councillors that you can connect in with. And for new councillors coming in, you know, you do a brilliant kind of role supporting those elected members in terms of their induction and in terms of the work that they do. So, you know, I think you've made a really important point about about continuous development, and don't be shy. Reach out and ask the question, whether that is to your kind of peer, kind of political leader, or whether it's to an officer. That is so important, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Anything else, Kath, from your perspective in terms of top tips?
I think it is about acknowledging that it's a partnership, but each component part of that partnership has a different role to play, but it's all with the same destination in mind. It isn't always about saying yes. Part of the job of a senior officer is to keep the integrity of the organisation, but also to keep members as well as officers safe. So it is about that advice about, well, that might not be the best way of going about it. Have you thought about? At the end of the day, individual decisions, but our job is to advise and support, and where we can, make it happen within budget, within policy, within the rules. But it is a partnership. But I think most officers will work very closely with their portfolio holder or committee chair, but actually, nothing. If you want a joined up organisation, I'm very keen to encourage officers to work across portfolios and have conversations with other cabinet members, because nothing only affects one bit of the world, does it? It's like dominoes. Yes. So the team being the wide thing, the senior leadership team of the council and the cabinet, or committee chairs if it's a committee system. It's not just a one-to-one.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing with us your insights. Certainly, this episode has really built on the individual conversations that we've had so far. So huge thank you. We really do appreciate it. And I guess in terms of leading in a political environment, your insights and your experience have been invaluable. So huge thank you. Thank you for joining the podcast series Leading in a Political Environment. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please visit our website, www.northwestemployers.org.uk, and look forward to seeing you next time.